I'm going to take a minute and kind of color in my drawing here. I'm going to use some colored pencils, and maybe I went too fast, but you get the idea. And it's not a perfect drawing in its proportion, but like I said, I'm just kind of sketching along as I'm telling the story. And maybe it'll help you instead of just hearing the words of it. But I'm going to use kind of an orangey type color, a good color to color in native people, I guess. Kind of close. And it has to do with, you notice I'm shading him in certain areas. And leaving it uncolored in other areas. So just kind of take a minute and do the best you can with it. Maybe I can show a little bit more shadow with a little bit darker brown, and it gives it a better sense of the color. Gives it a little bit more dimension. And I had a little practice drawing things like this, but you get the idea of it. And so maybe his clothes are made of white buckskin, and I'm just going to show some shadows on it like that. And like I said, this is just the start, the beginning of a story. And you know what? They say that this story, when it's told a long time ago, some versions of it might take 4 days to tell this whole story. But it talks about a lot, and it explains a lot about our old history. So now I'm going to move ahead, and you know, I'm going to take this next piece and just kind of put it over here. And you know what happened with the Ghanaian leaders is they said, well, they brought the Peacemaker into their village and they listened to his story, and they thought, wow, they said they really weren't ready to hear about this message of peace. And to them, it was a message that was kind of not what those war chiefs wanted to hear. And they told the Peacemaker, yeah, that all sounds good and well, but we're going to we're going to give you a test. And they took the Peacemaker next to a huge cliff. And this cliff was long ways down. And on the edge of this cliff, kind of leaning off, was a huge pine tree. And they told the Peacemaker, they said, here's our test. And they told him that they wanted him to climb to the top of this great big tree. And the Peacemaker thought to himself, well, if this is going to make it so that you will listen to this message of peace, then I think it's worth it. So the Peacemaker climbed up on this tree. And as he climbed up, the people down below, they told him, no, a little higher, keep going, you know. And it was a huge tree. So doing what he thought would help, he climbed a little further. And how's this, you know? And they told him, oh, keep going. A little more, keep going. Climb farther. And the Peacemaker climbed way up in this tree. And while he was up there, he got finally to about the top of the tree. And all the while that he was climbing, they had built a fire down here. They were using stone axes, and they were hacking away at the bottom of the tree, at the trunk of the tree. And meanwhile, it's kind of a cruel trick, but they're saying, keep going. And he had an idea what was going on, but it didn't take very long. Once he got up there, next thing you know, this great tree fell over the cliff, and it started falling way down there. And as it fell, they thought to themselves, well, there you go. We don't have to worry about that crazy message, peace, power, and righteousness, because they believed at that time that the idea of peace would be a sign of weakness. And they're afraid that if they accepted this peace, that other nations would think they were weak and try to take over on them, try to take over their land and steal their hunting ground. And it just wasn't done in those times, this idea of peace. And as I said, they were not at all ready to hear it. So they thought, all right, there we go. Falling down a cliff, you know, down it goes. Down goes a tree. There goes the Peacemaker. And he was gone. They didn't even see where he went. That tree was just gone. And they thought they were done. But the next morning, as they looked out of their village, they saw smoke coming from the same place. And they thought it was a trick. They sent their runners out there, and the runners went to the same place where the smoke was, and there sat the Peacemaker, and he once again offered them those wooden beads. And he offered them and told them this message, that they should go back and tell their people to rejoice. Because the message of peace, power, and righteousness has come back, has come to the people. And that he had the word of the Creator to remind the people and to share with the people. And they took him back. And they took him to their leaders, and the Mohawks listened to his entire message. And the way they left it was, they told the Peacemaker they wanted some time to think about it, because they didn't want to be the first. They were the great Ganyat nation, the great Mohawk nation. They had thousands of warriors. They're very strong. And they thought and felt that this would make them weak, or show them as being weak. And they said, we need some time to think about this. And so the Peacemaker left the Ganyat people. And he went on, and he went down the line, and what he did was he traveled from the east and traveled towards the west. So as he's traveling and left their territory, he came to the territory of the Oneota people. And once he got there to the Oneida Nation, the people of the Standing Stone, he did the same thing. He started a fire outside the village, and when they sent their runner brought him into the village to speak to the leaders, and he told them, as he did before, he used the beads. He said, these are my words, and I bring you this message of peace, power, and righteousness. And you know, the Oneota people, they listened to the message, and they thought to themselves, that would be so great if we could have peace. Because the Oneota nation was a smaller group than the Ganyat people, and they were having a hard time. And they were afraid. They were afraid if they were the first. They were afraid to be the first to accept this message of peace. And they also asked and wanted some time to think about it. And as he was preparing to leave their territory, they asked the Peacemaker, where will you go from here? And he says, I'm traveling from the east to the west. And he says, I'm going to the next nation, who was Onondaga. And he said that I'm going into their territory next. And the Oneota warned him. And they told him there's not one, but two men that you need to worry about. And these two men are dangerous. And you need to avoid them.